Well, hi, everyone. Thanks for joining the path to the automation fabric. My name is Scott King. I'm the chief marketer over here at Krista Software. And I'm pleased to be joined by our featured speakers and our guest speaker today, Craig Clair from Forrester, and John Michelsen, who's the co-founder and chief geek over at Krista Software. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it straight over to Craig to talk about the path to the automation fabric and the path to process transformation. Craig, how are you?
I'm doing well. It's great to be here. Great to talk about a subject that I spend a lot of time thinking about. So thank you for your time, everyone that's listening. And let's just go to the agenda slide and start in with the content, which we have, I think, a lot of. So we'll try to be really crisp, try to keep it interesting. The pandemic pushed a lot of us. I know we're tired of talking about the pandemic, but it really accelerated automation in many ways. We had to support workers at home. We had to support businesses had to support remote business. If you didn't have a mobile banking, app for deposits and you were a mid-sized bank, you had a real problem, right? If you couldn't do electronic signature, you had a real problem. So you had all these. We've done more transformation of work and business digitally in the last 2 years than we did probably since the Industrial Revolution. So we're going to talk about not only the state of the market, but where the market is headed. And Forrester, in its role, gives advice to buyers, to clients looking to invest in technology, wanting to do it in the best way. So we talk to a lot of them. And we're going to talk about, what are they saying? What are they looking to buy in the market to really improve their processes? And then just a few points on best practices that we've seen with companies that have really embraced automation. I think next slide, Scott. Yeah, and so always good with a webinar on something, on a topic that may not be second nature to everyone, is to have a little bit of grounding in what intelligent automation is. Now, we could start with the industrial automation in the 19th century and mills that ground flour using water power, but we won't. We'll start with really a period of intelligent automation that really kicked off in 2019, really led by what's shown there as stage one, or basic digitization. And RPA was a lot. You have to give RPA a lot of credit because they really pushed that phase of the market. And you see attended automation and unattended automation. All of a sudden, you could build a bot. The bot could take over very simple tasks that humans were doing. It tended to be very low value. And all of a sudden, enterprises said, you know what, I can get an ROI with this. But it wasn't transformational. There was no residual value in terms of process improvement. You just really took hours out of it. A bit like patching potholes in New England, which is what we do in the summer after our long winters. Now, stage two, it gets a little bit better for transformation because you start to add what I call the more pragmatic aspects of AI to that action component, the basic digitization, which could be, by the way, digital process automation or workflow, RPA. It could be a lot of automations that might exist at that stage one that are deterministic. Stage two, you start to add text analytics that can go into documents, go into forms, go into emails, and extract fields. And once you have a clean set of extracted fields, you can do a lot with it. You can determine insight. You can compare fields for error correction. You can understand sentiment. You can understand fraud and aberrant behavior, right? So this has become a real driver for companies, to invest in. Now, stage three really gets to work orchestration, where now you have this set of humans that are doing work, as they always have been since the beginning, but you also have these digital workers. And a lot of those are becoming more conversational digital workers, in that employees will have textual interaction or voice interaction with their little robots that are helping them get things done. So with that, you need orchestration that is really allocating work among humans and digital workers. And that's really what we call a phase three. But all of this requires a different institutional philosophy for companies and a different set of tools that really exist on the market today. And that's where we get into the automation fabric on the next slide. Yeah, and so this shows a bit of that state of the market, where we've been and where we're going. And again, starting with the tactical period, which is coming out of the RPA market that really blossomed in that 2017 timeframe. You had low code market that started, which is really the idea of building very usable apps by non-professional developers. Again, that's a trend that's been going on really since the 1990s with the first workflow tools that had graphical icon surfaces to try to create an abstraction above fourth generation language development for programming and create some level of abstraction. So it's been a continuous growth in that, leading to what we now call the low code market. So about the same time, 2018, 2019, you start to see really automation starting to get out of control a little bit. Too many DPA tools, too many RPA tools, not really understanding what to do with all the discussion at that time about AI. So organizations started to form centers of excellence to really understand automation and where it's going and so forth. I'll talk about that at the end. And you had the terms hyper automation, intelligent automation introduced. Now I just went through our definition of intelligent automation. There are many very valid terms for that in the industry, hyper automation being another one. Cognitive automation is often used as well. But anyway, that pandemic automation period, that's the period that really accelerated, really undersells the transformative value of the kind of automations that is available now with leading software platforms and services that are available to really change applications for the better, change customer experience, really elevate your employee experience. These are all really great ideas and things that can happen now. But really intelligent automation, that pandemic automation, was not concerned with that. It was more concerned with keeping the lights on, extracting hours, just getting the motion of business and the motion of work going. But now we're going to move into this area where we need much more cognitive AI-led automation. Krista, that's sponsoring this, is an example, I think, of an emerging category of vendors that do that. We're going to need much more focus on data integration, API, iPaaS consolidation, and that brings in edge technology and IoT. There are going to be sensors in just about everything, and you need and data is going to drive more process. So that's an element of what we call the automation fabric. And I'll talk about this briefly, but in an upcoming slide. But this notion of cognitive and physical automation integration. I mean, right now, if you're building a robot or a self-driving forklift, or you're doing some kind of really physical automation, those groups tend to be very siloed in organizations, and there's very poor linkage between the cognitive or intelligent automation and this physical world. Now, the physical robotics has really taken off, since the Great Resignation and the service worker shortage, where a lot of that augmentation of physical agility that we depend on in those job categories, can now be augmented, with a lot of, robotics that have been kind of sitting on the sidelines. Then all of a sudden, it's not just about, can I use a RoboCop to, replace a human cop? It's now, I can't find security officers at all, right? So the whole tenor has changed. So the need, we think, and we're talking 2023, 2024, whether the need for this integration of cognitive with physical automation is going to be an area. And I won't even get into W3 and distributed finance and blockchain, but there will be a time when this cognitive automation that deals mostly with on-premise and more centralized platforms and systems that companies have, we'll have to start thinking about, how do I integrate with this decentralized world that's edging into the crypto economy and so forth. But let's leave that for another topic. Now, one of the things of the fabric is that the automation becomes the application. The idea of building specific automation applications or use cases with those enabling capabilities we went through is really going to be prevalent. Now, these are just some examples. And again, I've put the physical systems and more of the cognitive systems at the bottom, because recognizing that there are going to be applications that'll be both physical and cognitive. And the tools you see, the DPA, the RPA, process discovery, data integration, machine learning, decision management, they're all tools in a toolbox that's going to build these automation apps. Simple ones like a loan approver, sentiment calculator, predictive maintenance. You can go to the next slide, but I think you get the point. It's going to be about applications, about automation applications. Why we think this is important is sort of summarized here, is that companies that get this right are just going to outperform those that don't. And we have to start looking at that transformative potential that this automation has. It's not just about tactical incremental process improvement. And we need a lot more interoperability to avoid the islands of automation. That's what's happening. The next silos we'll be talking about are not silos in finance and silos in core systems. There's going to be silos of automations that have been built. And you see companies already with 5 and 6, chatbot stacks in-house, 8 different RPA tools. They have machine learning that's getting infused in 30 different applications. So it's very critical to have this, to reduce the inability to combine these automations to work really towards the end-to-end process that many companies are trying to optimize.
And Craig, if you don't mind, I'll jump in with just a quick comment, because we
Please.
see this, especially as we talk to customers, that this notion that you've just described, that automation is the app, and that the challenge now is that fragmentation. That fragmentation with technology evolving at a faster and faster pace only is exacerbated until something like an automation fabric becomes the way that we deal with it. And the notion of automation is the app is terrific, because it has the notion of outcomes. Even apps today are typically a task of a larger outcome. Your ERP isn't the entire end-to-end outcome of getting an order placed by a customer and fulfilled. It's just a piece of it. So all of those different pieces, some of it bespoke, some of it packaged, and many people and roles involved. When automation becomes the app, it has the opportunity to get to that end-to-end outcome automation. It has the ability to then use that very notion of fabric, weave all of those pieces together, whether those pieces are systems or people or AI, and have that notion. So we love, among many things that you guys have published, and you specifically, we really like this idea of the automation fabric as a way to describe that weaving together of all of these capabilities, instead of just throwing more tech at it and expecting people to be able to keep up with that kind of pace. Because fundamentally, we don't only not have the number of people we need, we don't have the capacity for that level of change, right? We humans don't embrace change at the same pace that we can create it in technology. So I think there's a great deal of value in the way that you're describing it.
Yeah, thanks, John. I couldn't agree more. I think if you had to look at one of the big differences between intelligent automation, hyperautomation, and the fabric, is that it is outcome oriented, use case oriented, combining multiple automation aspects. Whereas intelligent automation, hyperautomation was just going for a task, was going for a piece of the process. And not that that wasn't a really good thing to do, and it still is a good thing to do. But I think now we're at a point where we can look a little more broadly. So this is what we try to do at Forrester is create really confusing slides so that we then can explain them. This is one of my favorites. This is the automation fabric concept, which you see is kind of the larger black circle there. And it's kind of showing the merging of these different automation silos that are emerging in companies, kind of coming under this umbrella that the fabric is going to provide. Of course, intelligent automation is the larger one. That's the one that we're focused on in this talk. But you also have automation that exists in what we call technology automation, which is, so think of that as infrastructure and operations. Right? So this is, key IT operations and IT service operations, and release automation for new software that's being developed, and test automation. These are silos of automation, and a lot of them have strong capabilities. Workload automation is still a very powerfully used set of capabilities. The mainframes still operate to run a good part of the financial system that we have. You have the physical automation that I'll talk about in a minute, and you have this emerging cloud and hybrid management, which is coming. You want containers and Docker. You want all these new rapid deployment and scalability aspects that the clouds provide, and that's a new element of infrastructure that needs to be monitored. So there's AI monitoring for that environment. That's all very laser focused automation, and not all of these need to be brought together, but there will be applications that will require the integration of these multiple automation silos. I think the next slide we can do. I want to be conscious of my time here. And I could spend a lot of time on this slide. This is a major one. This is the one killer slide out of a major study that Forrester just completed to look at that world of physical automation that really can help the deal with the worldwide shortage of service workers. This is a real problem. We have a shortage of living wage for them. We have a shortage of healthcare for them. We have a shortage of childcare for them. And after the pandemic, many of them just decided not to come back. They found side hustles and gigs and other ways, maybe ratcheting down consumerism, to survive in different ways without that, maybe not so friendly boss at the fast food restaurant, right? So we need all of a sudden, we need physical automation to, not just for keeping a lid on wages, but for keeping the business going. And so the examples we're going to talk about, a little bit later is the area of food preparation. But to just think a minute about cleaning and sanitation robots. The pandemic was an absolute boost to them. Retail chains like Walmart are buying thousands of janitorial robots. You have security robots that are now being very, very effective. Robot dogs are fabulous. I was speaking at a conference recently, and there was a spot, the Boston Dynamics robot dog that was, sort of corralling people and moving them into my session, which I really appreciated. But we have to be careful because a lot of these new, physical robotic things can be creepy for individuals. In that case, I just did an interview with, with some folks in Hawaii where the robot dogs were trained to sniff out COVID in homeless people, and they were just freaking these people out. And they were just kind of, this is people that are already mentally challenged, and you have this robot dog getting in their face. So we have to be careful with how we're using this automation, but it's going to happen, and it's happening now. We looked at the venture money going into this physical automation world. And it's been going on for years in warehouse and physical, movement, but now these other areas are just exploding. So we'll talk about food preparation, and my favorite subject to talk about there is just what's going on in India. Now, India has a lot of labor. India is going to surpass China as the most populated nation in the world in a few short years, and 40% of the population really works in what's called the informal economy. They need work to do. They don't have any work. They sort of scratch together a living. So you'd think does it make sense for robots to start preparing food in India? It turns out it does. Ghost kitchens are popping up like crazy. And that refers to a completely end-to-end process where the robot, well, of course you have a mobile app for ordering the food, but then the robot is dropping something in a fryer and pulling it out. And then at the end, it's totally packaged. And maybe there's a QA human at the end to see that everything's right. But takeout has become so prevalent that these things make a lot of sense. And anyone can afford these. I just interviewed a Jamaican restaurant in Atlanta that was able to, and this one is a small restaurant. This is not a fancy place. You don't get dressed up to go there. And it had a food truck as an extension of the restaurant, right? That's what we're talking about here. They were able to buy a robot to greet people, hand them a bottle of water, greet them in Jamaican, and then just running completed dinners from a window to those in the restaurant saved about 2 to 3 miles of running and walking for the service staff. And what happened? The waiters and waitresses were able to make more money in tips because they could spend more time with the customers because they weren't running back and forth to the window. Now, if that small restaurant can afford and make a robot work, I think you're going to see them a lot. So anyway, that's kind of what's trending in that area. I think we go to the next slide here just to keep my timing down. This is my last slide. You may all appreciate that. But it is a bit of a complicated one. It's one where we've tried to make it simple. If you want to describe automation, and you want to distinguish types of automation, is there a very simple 4-level framework that does that? And this is what we came up with. And basically, if you look at level 1 patterns, I think this is in terms of process patterns. Level 1 patterns we've been doing forever. Rules-driven workflow. software that completely controls a particular process. And if you look at the percentages on the right, 81% of companies, that's the dominant process. Now, employee or customer driven, this is where you get that conversational digital worker that I talked about earlier in that work orchestration period. So think of combining, Krista type technology at the front end with maybe RPA or other APIs on the back end as the action component, and really creating a informed chatbot in the B2C world, or an employee robot to help an employee. And that's 12% of processes of companies have those processes, a combination of NLP and say RPA. But really where you get to transformation, and a lot of what we're talking about with the fabric is moving more towards this, leveraging these great technologies that are coming out with machine learning and deep learning and so forth. You look at 3 and 4 patterns and they are non-deterministic, meaning that the actions being driven by probability. And that's a totally different world. Those of you that love gambling, you go into a casino and you're playing blackjack, it's all about probability. It's no different. You're using the same level of probability in a lot of the machine learning decision management at level 3 and level 4. So you have to be careful about keeping a human in the loop in that. And that's why we really like level 3 patterns, because there you're taking advantage of AI, but you're keeping a human in the driver's seat longer. You have a default mechanism. So you can avoid level 4 issues where it's a closed loop. So a self-driving car is a closed loop. We just had a whole bunch of Cruise, that's GM's, autonomous driving vehicles that now were licensed as robo-taxis in San Francisco. They just had 5 or 6 of them fail and block traffic because they lost connectivity. Now, if you're going to get around that problem, you have to fill the trunk up with servers and technology and really create an edge environment. So we're not quite there yet. So closed loop brings in issues of that type, but also issues of the perfect algorithm. You can't make mistakes if you're flying a new 737 MAX jet. You can't have sensors, misread the issues of the plane and not have humans in the loop to deal with it. So level 4 requires perfect data, perfect algorithms. So when you think about your inventory of processes, and this is the sort of the final point on this, think about where you are compared to where the rest of the world is, and try to say, how do I migrate more and more of my processes to level 3 and 4? Because that's where you're going to really build your business. Next slide, please.
By the way, I'd love to comment on that. We see ourselves as an opportunity, and I'll get to introduce Krista in a minute, as an opportunity to get you even to level 4. But frankly, you're always in that going from 4 back to 3, back to 4, back to 3 place, because you must necessarily involve humans. And as the world changes, data models, the data training that informs models that become your stage 4, they automatically become out of date or irrelevant, and humans are the driving factor. It's human capital that can get us from 3 to 4. But then as soon as change occurs, it's the instincts of humans that have to take us back to 3 and get software to get back to 4. So it's humans training computers, not us having to learn how to work with them. It's them learning how to work with us and understanding what we know that they don't, and enabling an organization to get to stage 4 via human capital. And again, as just repeating myself to make sure I made it clear, as changes occur, here comes a new regulation, here comes a new way we want to do business, a new product, a new type of customer, that's entirely upon a burden upon human capital to creatively train software in order to reach back from 3 to 4. So this is we think that never goes away. This essentially, this pattern of 4 is what we already know how to do, and 3 is what is creative, new, and different about the world, and is constantly going from 3 to 4 as it becomes known.
Yeah, John, I think that's a great point, that these things are not total migration, right? You're always going to have level 1 patterns. You're always going, you're going to combine them with level 4 and level 3 and so forth. So it's kind of iterative. So I like your thoughts there.
Well, Craig, thank you so much for giving us a good sense of where Forrester and you particularly are. And one of the reasons we wanted so much to produce this particular asset with you is because even back from early last year, and even prior to that, as we were even forming Krista and doing fundamental design, you were one of those people in the analyst community that we thought really had your finger on the pulse of this. And that's why one of the first people we wanted to brief, just some great work on seeing, and especially this whole idea of it's really about human capacity and human capabilities being best expressed. This isn't an either or. We find it very challenging frequently in our market, where customers are being described about how to take people out of the loop, when in fact it's humans that make it all interesting, and humans are what make it creative and novel. So we have to find a way to continue to leverage increasing technology. Absolutely, right? I'm a software geek. That's, of course, you'd be looking for me to sell you software and get you more automated, but to do so in such a way that your people are more effective, not eliminated, but actually more of them and more effective. So we'd like to set the ground, the ground for how we conceived our particular offering in the automation space, and how we see ourselves being, we think, a unique opportunity to achieve something that Craig laid out very clearly in the path to the automation fabric. So we know that you guys are spending a lot of time and a lot of money in a number of different areas within the automation space, and these are only just a handful. The numbers are already huge. But if you move through this and you kind of lay it out on the timeline that Craig has already provided to us, this is all, you could say it's sort of the run-up to this notion of now weaving it all together. And placing these bubbles in exact places is a debate, right? We don't need to do that. We'd be happy to move them based on your thoughts, whoever that might be. The point is, it's actually going to take some fundamental capabilities of each of those markets and others to actually create that fabric. In fact, it's got to be something that can weave all kinds of capabilities together. And that's the phrase we like so much about this notion of the automation fabric. What is it that's going to weave all of that together? That fabric is bringing everything you need, whether that is system capability, AI capability, or of course, human capability, together in order to make that happen. That automation app needs to look, in our view, something more like this. And this is what Krista was from its designed to do, to orchestrate outcomes among people, systems, and AI. So this is what we think makes Krista unique, and why that notion of the fabric we think is so relevant, because we're not going to get there in the siloed world of, I've got great automation tech, but I'm not all that good at communicating with people. Or I'm a great collaboration platform among people, but I sort of give you this really ugly kind of wire hanging out for you to plug in your automation. Or I can build you great models for certain predictable outcomes or whatever, but I have no idea how to actually integrate it with people and systems and keep it refreshed and up to date. Those are the problems that we see most of our customers facing right now. And we think that the capabilities inherent in those systems and that AI, and of course in people, are all there. What we need is that elegant, simple orchestration of all of those to actually reach that next step. And we think that that is why we're so excited about showing you Krista, because that's exactly where we're at. Now, I'd like to do that in the form of a case study rather than bury you with slides, because like any good software startup, we can overwhelm you with slides. And we have actually the inverse problem or goal that Craig does. It sounds like Craig increases complexity to increase the amount of time that you spend with Forrester. I can totally understand that's your world, Craig. Ours is, if our slides aren't silly simple, then we end up losing our customer in this. Oh, we don't have the time to, the slide isn't the artifact for us or isn't the outcome. But here I'll try to make what we think is a relatively complex topic as simple as we can. We think that right now your function of adaptability, how do I get all of those capabilities, human, system, AI, how do I get all of that stuff changed quickly so that I can deal with realities as they come? Right now, your adaptability is a function of how complex your processes are, how the systems involved, and of course the people involved. And the challenge is that's too much. Your adaptability is a function of too many different things. And those too many different things, especially when involving people who are, by the way, the slowest to change among those, it's just the nature of who we are. creates a challenge, which is why I always get frustrated. I see all these digital transformation surveys that say, oh, my digital transformation failed and I blame it on my people. Well, wait a minute. They were the same people. If you went into this whole initiative, assuming your people were suddenly going to have this dramatic increase in their ability to cope with change or their IQ or whatever you expected, that was on you. That's not on them, right? And by the way, with the data now saying that that's the case so often, you got to go into a transformation initiative thinking, my people are the constant. How do I take complexity out, not introduce more? So we think that this is a fundamental algorithm we have to do something about. Your function of adaptability can't have people in it for the most part, and it can't be so highly interrelated with steps and systems. So let's go to a specific example. And we chose a restaurant because, of course, Craig in our prep meetings, he focused on food service, and we do too, by the way. And as an industry, it's the second largest employer in the US, and they don't have that much tech. And why don't they have that much tech? Because frankly, it's a broad cross section of the US population. And therefore we've built so much complexity in the tech that we try to sell them, they can't use it. That's the real reason. Restaurants would be highly automated if we built tech that is built for humans. Well, maybe now's a good time to introduce. The mission statement of Krista Software is to make technology that understands people. Not to make understandable technology for people, not to make people have to understand our technology. That, I think, is pretty much the rest of the market. Our mission is to make technology that understands people. So when you look at all of the things, take just a restaurant manager of one of the many roles, there are countless processes, many times a day. Some of them are emergency or sudden, so they can't even really plan a day very well. And it turns out 80+% of the time that a manager spends is doing things that software could do at least 90% of or better, right? And less than 20% of their time actually thinking, creating, planning, making the restaurant a better experience for their customers or for their employees, et cetera. Now, we just did a quick search on one of the big job boards. There are over 6,000 openings right now for restaurant managers in Dallas alone. 6,000. And yet, the ones that are there are spending 80+% of their time doing work that humans should not be doing. Not as in we don't want them there. It's literally they could be better used in other capacities. The human capacity for doing things instinctively better, creatively, in human contact is so much more valuable to those restaurants, but 80+% of their time is spent in doing things that software could do better. Okay, restaurants an example. I would submit, no matter who you are that's listening, watching this, you're in probably the same boat in several areas of your business. And so when we think about what would transformation be like? What if you had that automation fabric that was able to integrate your people, your systems, and introduce AI in a compelling way? What would it be like? Well, here's just one simple example that's been deployed. One of the many unbelievably complex, solvable challenges in the restaurant world is because there's 70% turnover in restaurants in the US. Can you imagine being one of those responsible for having to basically turn over your workforce every 18 months, right? They spend 10 hours a week typically in recruiting tasks, scheduling, interviews, doing follow-ups. Of course, every HR hire has lots of challenges these days. All of that, at least 10 hours of a manager's week at a time is spent in recruiting tasks. Krista makes that about 2 hours. And those 2 hours are, of course, the human interaction hours of actually sitting or on a phone or whatever with a human, identifying if that person's a good fit for their organization. We can't take that away, not going to take that away. Can do some insights there, but clearly that's the human piece that is in the thinking part of the pie slice on the previous slide. What we've done is we've taken those 8 hours, and by the way, these numbers were not, we didn't write the slide in order to make this work. That's the magic of the 80-20 rule. So we've taken 8 hours into this, just this one area of endeavor down to 2 hours, but it's not just there, right? It's what about no-shows? Why is a manager having to realize, wait, why isn't Sally on the floor 20, 30 minutes after her appointed time, and then getting on a phone when software could have been asking Sally 5 minutes till or after with a text message, and then immediately finding similar people reaching out and saying, hey, can you cover for Sally? We're not able to find, whatever that is, right? And we could go on and on. It gets more sophisticated even, right? Krista will predict proper staff levels, supply levels. Krista develops a sniff test for anomalous activity, anomalous values, anomalous behaviors, all kinds of things. And what this becomes is the actions become and the insights become sourced typically by Krista. Again, to my previous comment, mostly by observing people. Not because Krista already knows how to run a restaurant. Krista is taught to run a restaurant essentially by people. This is how it works. These are the people that do it. These are the systems that do their part. That's the outcome, Krista. Now you go orchestrate it for me. And that
So John, let me ask you a question real quick.
Sure.
This is great. So does this favor the larger, more scaled chains because they can invest in technology like this and sort of by extension, not help the franchise models, which are really small independent businesses?
So Craig, this becomes, so Krista's catalog contains these automations already, contains the connectivity to those systems already, and in fact embodies a lot of those best practice type things. So when the larger chain adopts this, they're going to tweak that 80-20 and they're going to change our processes and they're going to make them a little bit different because they operate a little differently. The mom and pop restaurant has access to the way dozens of other restaurants, whether they're small or huge, how they operate. They will actually be able to embrace the way that maybe a more optimal way to run already exists and is already in our catalog, and is able to even make it their own by saying, hey, we don't do it quite like that. We like for this person to be involved there, or we use a different system for that. So they actually have assets to take in.
So you could provide this as a kind of app as a service so that it would be affordable by the franchise that has 2 Dunkin' Donuts.
That is absolutely right. In fact, one of our early incubation customers was a 1-person baker. And if I go 2 or 3 minutes over, I apologize to my audience, but I think this gets exactly to where Craig is going. This incubation customer of ours, a single multi-generation baker, and he was struggling because his business was growing, but he was working from an Excel spreadsheet printed out at 5 a.m. And by the time 6 p.m. rolls around, it's a total mess. He could never get his orders out. It was an old school, typical, by the way, half the people I'm talking to are running their department on Excel, right? He's doing the same thing. He doesn't have any other access to technology. Now, his wife is saying, why are you even bothering anymore? Just quit the business, the family business of generations, and just go work for a bakery, because you're in over your head. This is a terrible mess. We find him and we ask him, just try using our solution in order to do this. So we help him understand these processes. His invoices go out automatically. His customers sign on an Android device as he makes deliveries. We can fully automate that baker, turning even when he needs to change things into minutes of change that he or one of our folks will do for him. And yes, the price point is so low that even a single person baker can actually afford to do it. So we have a mission of automation, not just for the large, but all the way down to the smallest organization you could possibly imagine. So here is a specific example in that recruiting, where even many of the folks in the kitchen, hostesses, these folks may not even have a smartphone, but they all text. So there's a QR code sitting at the restaurant on the table saying, hey, you want to join us? Just here's a QR code, or here, type this, or just send a text to this number. Krista is the one that is in fact collecting information required for HR to process the CV, scheduling interviews, doing all of that kind of stuff, which takes tons of the human activities out and keeps them in the thinking, right? So restaurants are a really good example, obviously other businesses, but it's back to how do we express human capital in ways that keep us unique and get machines to do the things that, frankly, if a machine can do, humans should not be. It's so funny. You look at a construction site. If a construction site full of construction workers were given nothing but hammers, you'd say that there's something terribly bad going on because there's such better equipment for them. And yet we're putting office people in a desk and giving them the equivalent of only a hammer, trying to figure out how to build a business. It's get to more sophisticated automation and you will get a much higher outcome. So the goal here, when you shift these outcomes from the heads of everybody and who knows what systems and what are all the processes, people have to keep all of that moving, to automation through an automation fabric, say like what Krista can help you construct, provide. changing the business becomes just changing Krista. And that's a minutes thing. So you're no longer having to teach people to go a different way. Krista is asking them to participate. You notice that text stream, your interviewer and your manager did not have to know what was happening next. Krista knows what's happening next and just asks you to participate. So changing your process or changing your business or introducing a new step or a new way to do things is just a matter of changing Krista, not changing your people. Your people are participating, obviously, but Krista is actually orchestrating it. So there's no more, I can't do that because I can't get my people to do that. By the way, that's lame. But even if it were the case, right? A certain amount of change is just too much for people. Shift this to a conversational aspect. And this conversation has flowed between Scott, Craig, myself, and hopefully your memory, your thoughts, completely fluid, right? We engage in change when it's conversational. We do not when it is rote. So this is the key to our business adaptability, we believe. And it's how to get all of those system capabilities, AI capabilities, and of course, human capabilities dynamically expressed. So that is, in summary, what our product, Krista, is all about. Why we're so excited about where the market is going per industry leaders like Craig's comments. And I would just summarize with the value prop around outcome orientation, embracing humans, faster change than you would expect. It's good, Scott. And one thing we didn't touch on in this particular webinar, but we certainly would love to follow up with you, is Krista's ability to build and integrate AI in a really elegant way. We'd love to show you, because we definitely think that this orchestration, this fabric, right? Something's got to weave it all together if we're talking about a fabric. We think that Krista is a good candidate for helping you do that. Once that's together, once all of that is seamlessly put together, the opportunity to optimize, get yourself to stage 3 and stage 4 in Craig's model, that is the introduction of AI. And once that fabric brings those things together, the ability for you to do that in an easy way, in a transparent way, becomes very, very, very powerful. So we'd love to introduce you to Krista as a part of maybe your journey to that automation fabric. And Craig, I would say, just as a final comment, have really, really appreciated your thought leadership in the market and doing this piece with us. With that, I'll hand it back to Scott and Craig for final thoughts, and then really appreciate everybody's attention.
Hey, thanks, John. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Yeah, it was interesting that we chose the restaurant example, because everyone can kind of, relate to maybe a back office. A lot of us, like I actually worked at a hamburger stand once before in high school, and can feel the pain on a small scale, but a larger scale, it would be incredibly advantageous to look at automation for this. But Craig, just from, what we've talked about before, through the evolution and the market, in your stage 1, 2, 3, and what John had to say about, orchestrating automation, or basically automating the automation. What are your closing thoughts on what we talked about today?
I think it's a great opportunity to really do things in a different way. The pandemic, brutal in so many ways, but more transformation digitally than we've seen ever. And the greatest change to the way we work and to the workforce ever in 2 years. So it's a time to do a refresh and say, what can we do now? And to try to leverage those digital muscles that have been created. You talked about the food area. People came in with starting to use QR codes, and they had to get mobile to order. This is a sea change in the productivity of these businesses. Really, you look at our productivity numbers, not to go off on a tangent, but for decades they've been anemic. The U.S. productivity numbers, as published by the government, they were 2, 3, 4% in the last 3 or 4 quarters. A lot of that due to this pandemic automation, a lot of which we're talking about today. So I think it's time. It's a refresh time. I think we can look at things in a very different way. We can start to look at how these technologies are getting easier with low-code tools, low-code principles, how the providers are getting more packaged in what they deliver, so that there's less embedded models for doing things that you might have had to, have data scientists construct There's an opportunity if we just open our eyes, and I would encourage you all to look at your automation centers. If you have them if you don't have them, you should set them up, and many companies are, and try to get some strategic view of automation in your organization, because it's going to be the difference between companies that excel and those that don't over the next 10 years. Thank you all.
All right. Thanks, John. Thanks, Craig. Really enjoyed it. And thanks, everyone. If you have any questions or would like to follow up with Craig or John, please send us an email at krista@kristasoft.com